setting up the recording for the lecture so that you've got this to look back on later. And let's see if we can do this. And this. Excellent. We're recording, you've done your attendance. It's week 2 of digital culture and you're here and it's 9 a.m. and everyone's feeling a little bit like they'd rather maybe be in bed. Hopefully you've had an enjoyable Freshers Week, settling in again. Today, we've got a fairly large chunk of things to go through. What I've actually done is I've moved a couple of things around, mostly based on what worked well last year and some questions that have come up in previous years and I know that people are asking this year. So instead of waiting for Q&A, I'm going to try and address some of the questions that I know people are going to ask, but I'm also going to try and make space for some Q&A at the end of this, at the end of every lecture. So usually what works quite well is to have someone who's good at timekeeping to give me a wave at about 11:45 at every lecture. It doesn't have to be the same person, and just say wherever we've got to, we're going to pause and make space for some time for questions at the end, because otherwise what happens is that gets rushed and then you kind of go away and you have burning questions that aren't answered. So the first thing I want to do is actually go through the summer task that you did over the holiday. Give me a wave if you did the summer task. Yeah, I can tell because like just the sheer number of purple things on this guy here. I was really impressed at how you engaged with it. It was really great. Hopefully some of you can sort of start to see your work here already. Give me another wave if you enjoyed the summer task. Fewer people. Was it a bit of a chore? Okay, so the nice thing about that summer task is no one gave you any guide rails. It's like if you go bowling and you put the side rails up on the bowling alley. No one gave you any of those, so it was very possible for you to sort of launch a ball down the alley and for it to go off in a completely odd direction, and you didn't really know what, like, there was no expectation that you will have used any of this software before. It's up to you to then try and figure it out. You have to go on the internet, go find a video on YouTube of someone who's explaining how to do a certain thing. You don't even know how to choose a specific piece of software to use. And I was really impressed at a lot of the work. I'm not going to have time to go through all of it, but there were a couple of ones which I thought I would just sort of like pick out and put people, not necessarily on the spot, actually just to say I was really impressed with a lot of what I saw. So the purple ones kind of start down here. There was this guy here, Francesco Townsend, and this one, I believe you started by using Revit. Is that right? Is Francesco here? Yeah. So you started out by using Revit, and the thing that amazed me is I'm about to, at some point in this lecture, tell everyone that Revit doesn't do curves very well, or it's hard work to make Revit do curves. And basically the first thing that someone presented in the summer task was using Revit, and then this building is full of curves. Did you enjoy the process of trying to work that out? How did you feel about what was going on when you were kind of fiddling around with this?
Yeah, I quite enjoyed it. Using lots of like YouTube videos and ChatGPT to help with it.
Amazing. Great example of like, well, I don't know, so someone else is going to have to help me out. I really like the output. Obviously, you've got control over getting the output onto a page as well, which is really lovely to see. There was some really lovely. Where is it? There were a couple of examples of. So I know the architect who designed this building. Oh no, this is Kendrew Quad, isn't it? Who did the Christchurch boathouse? The one with a very, very, very thin roof at the top of it. There's I think a few people had that as their building, and I think it was this one, or was this one of the examples? Yeah, University College Boathouse. Sorry, not Christchurch Boathouse. University College Boathouse. So I met the architect who designed this, who is a really interesting guy, and he was talking about all about how they made this these moves to have these really tiny thin roof on the top, but it would also have to kind of have some kind of substance, because you can't just have like a single sheet of metal on a roof. This was like 3 steps. It's like you start from the image, you find the image of the thing that you want to design. You've had a go modeling it in Rhino with basically this kind of combination of blocky structures, because you might think at the beginning, University Boathouse, you look at it and you go, well, it's just a whole load of boxes. That's really easy, isn't it? Charlie, are you here, Charlie? Yeah. Was it as easy as you thought to just put a whole load of boxes together and then be like, oh, great, and now I can make an image of it? Because it looks on the page like you found this really easy. Is Charlie actually here? No. Well, I'm going to guess, if Charlie's not here, that my guess is that it isn't as easy as it looks on the page. Does anyone resonate with that idea that it isn't as easy as it looks when you watch someone on YouTube and they're just like click, 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 and then something amazing happens, and then you try it and it's like you're bashing your head against a wall? Just give me a thumbs up if you agree with that statement. Right. To be honest, if the only thing that you learned over the summer from these tasks, or this task, was that it's nowhere near as easy as you think, that is a really good lesson. The Maggie Centre, has anyone actually visited the Maggie Centre here in Oxford? It's well worth going and having a look. It's a lovely, lovely little building. The thing that really impressed me about this particular one, this is Sam Greetham? Yeah, Sam. So obviously there's a kind of 3D thing, but you've correctly identified that if you want your output image to look any good at all, you can't just press a button and get some 3D render. There needs to be Photoshop involved. And one of the things that we will look at in this course is not just how do you render your materials, but how do you then post-process it so that it's got this kind of much more evocative and real feeling. Maybe you're looking for something hyper-realistic, maybe you're looking for something more hand-drawn, for example, or whatever you're aiming for. It's not going to come from one piece of software. It's generally going to come from a combination of software involving 3D and 2D. So I really like that as an approach, and I think there were a lot of people who did similar things where they realized that what came out of the software was potentially a little bit like not quite enough, and it sort of left you thinking, oh, I wish I could do more. And I really liked the text that you wrote. I read quite a lot of pretty much everyone's text. And one of the things that kept on coming up was like, I tried this, and it didn't quite work, and then I had to do this. And that is basically the introduction to the course. This stuff is quite hard. It's harder than you think, and you have to try a few different ways in order to get something. This was modeled in Revit. Very, very impressive Revit modeling. Happy to give you a job at my firm. You're better than most of the people who I try and get to work in Revit. And then you took it into D5 Render, and even D5 Render with a whole load of really, really cool settings that you can play with. You're still sort of coming up against the limitations of single pieces of software. And it's really lovely to see. This one, I think, was Rhino. Yeah, Rhino 3D model. And did you have fun, whoever this is, Juan, did you have fun modeling these guys on the roof? Because they're quite complicated structures, aren't they? Is Juan here? No? He's in bed. Well, if he was here, he'd probably say, yeah, it wasn't as easy as I thought. And a lot of this geometry is quite a lot more complicated than just simply putting a box into a 3D software. I'm not going to sort of spend all day on all of these, but there were a few which were the ones I wanted to pick out. Michela. I can't promise to get your name right. This guy here, this one looks like you started with Shaper 3D. Did anyone else use Shaper 3D? I think there were a couple of people who used Shaper 3D. What was great about that was I've never used Shaper 3D before. I have absolutely no understanding of how this software works. And what it looks like is that it's given you the ability to kind of not just have straight lines, but flow these into some curves. Is Michaela here? No. But then, again, it's kind of back to this thing of like not just using one tool, but relying on a combination of tools. Clearly, what's then happened is that we've gone from a 3D modeling process into maybe adding some materials, so you can see the glass in the windows is like another layer of materials. But then this image suddenly has a lot more emotion to it. It's got this kind of sense of maybe fog and cloud and weather and context and trees and people that you wouldn't get by simply modeling those things. You're going to have to composite them together. This Keble College, by the way, have you visited this? This is a super cool building, proper like 1950s, 60s kind of hyper explosion of modernism. The Keble College bar, if you can get into the Keble College bar, it's like, I don't know, something out of Mad Men. It's very cool. I was there just the other week, and it's a cool place to be. Hilda, Bessie Building, St Anthony's College. These guys here, obviously, what's also useful is the stuff where you tried something and it was like you just couldn't see how to do it. So clearly, these shapes here are actually quite complicated because effectively they're like little trapezoids coming out of a window. And it was really nice to see that you absolutely had a go. And you're like, well, I can definitely do that in 2D and kind of extrude it up. This is Crystalia. Is Crystalia here? Or just doesn't want to put her hand up. Oh, yeah, you are here. Sorry, yeah. I loved this. And I bet you thought, oh no, I can't make the shape, right? Is that kind of what you were thinking? You were thinking like, oh, I failed. Isn't this terrible? Because there's this one shape and I can't make it. And everything else has like come out super well. Like in terms of the way you modeled it, you've had zero experience and you've basically like done an amazing job of getting the massing of this building exactly right. And then these guys here, it's like I can sense your frustration. And that's fine as well. One of the cool things, I think I mentioned this to someone last week, about 3D software is I was having a conversation with someone who is an expert in architectural world, an expert in a software called Maya. It's incredibly complicated. People use it for 3D animation, and like studios like Pixar use it to animate human and sort of biological forms. And it's incredibly complicated. And I was like, how do you learn this software? And she was like, my secret is I only really know 10 commands, and I just use them again and again and again. And the software can do 10,000 different things, but I just know the area that I know. It isn't much, it absolutely isn't much to jump from being able to do what you've done here to working out these quite complicated shapes. And at some point in the next probably 2 or 3 weeks, I will show you a command, and suddenly you'll be able to do everything that you wanted to do. And you're not far away. So I think I want to say to anyone else who's in that position where they felt like, I felt like I failed because I couldn't model this thing. The answer is no, nowhere near failing. You are one step away from learning basically the one workflow or command that will allow you to model anything that you want. So really well done for submitting all this stuff and putting all these things in. Was there anyone who I've skipped over who like really wants to put their work on the screen? You just wave your hand, because there was some really nice. Was it? Oh no, that one was a different one. I'm going to focus on the images as well. The images here, in terms of the rendering out of those images, there was some really strong work, and we'll get to that later on. One of the things I love about this is you can see that Oscar has really thought about the light and the reflection of that light on a particular material. So I cycle past this building every day on the way to work, actually. And every morning it looks a little bit different because there's these reflective tiles. And clearly, Oscar has not just modeled the orientation of these tiles and placed this geometry in 3D, and then applied a material to it so that it's kind of a shiny, reflective material rather than just a blank, grey nothing. But then also thought about, well, where do I have to put the sun in the sky so I get this kind of glint off the roof? Is Oscar here? Give me a wave if you're Oscar, or if you want to pretend to be Oscar. Yeah, great. Hello, Oscar. The thing about that is, I'm imagining this wasn't accidental. I'm imagining that there was a point at which you realized you could rotate the angle of the sun in the sky and the angle of your view and get different reflections when you're setting up a view. And this is a great example of the way that you compose an image as well as just click a button and render it, and the technical things behind the materials or anything like that. It's about how you choose to set up your shot. And it's nice to see some birds. Birds are like somehow just an architectural staple. I could spend a long time going through lots of these things. I quite liked the timber cladding on this one. Hannah Weber, did you spend a long time modeling lots and lots of bits of wood in Rhino? Where's Hannah? Yeah? Yes. How long did it take? A long time. And you, when you were about halfway through, how were you feeling? You didn't enjoy it. Do you enjoy the fact that that end result is something that really has a huge amount of like, there's a huge concept there that I think you could show that to anyone and say, look, there's your building, but what would it look like if we did this in timber? And they would absolutely understand what you were trying to get at. Yeah? Okay. Oh, yeah, of course, because obviously the modeling is like, well, yeah, great, I can now model all these sticks in Rhino, and it's taken me forever in a day. There are ways in which I could show you how maybe to speed that up if you wanted to, but to be honest, the way that you've done it is probably as good a way as any. But then producing this image, suddenly we've gone from something that's like really frustrating and just creating geometry to something that actually has material and it has like, you can kind of sense being there rather than just working in this grey, sad space. Those are the emotions that we want to keep hold of, which is like we're producing imagery that has emotion. We're not producing geometry that's dumb and horrible. Really appreciated the what's the word? Perseverance in that one particularly, because I know that would have taken a very long time. Right. I will come back. There may be some other ones that I'll remember halfway through the lecture, and we'll come back. But really enjoyed a lot of all of your work. So thank you very much for doing that. And hopefully you've had a sort of leg up now, and you're kind of warmed up, you're limbered up, and ready to tackle 3D modeling and creation in a fun way this year. I want to. Now kind of leading on from that summer task, some of you use Revit because you knew that Revit existed and you could get a free copy of it. Some of you used Rhino because maybe a second or third year has said to you, use Rhino. Maybe you just found Rhino on your own and you thought, oh, well, this looks like a useful software for modeling and then creating images of buildings. Some of you used other things. I think one person used Fusion, Autodesk Fusion. Is she here? I was speaking to her last week, used Fusion. No, maybe she's already given up because Fusion is like, oh yeah, you did. Yeah, this is, I was really impressed. Basically, you had no idea, and so you just were like, well, I'll pick up a tool and I'll see if I can do something with it. And actually the outcomes were really interesting. And one of the things that we tend to notice is that the tools that we use have an impact on the output that you can create. So going back to that, I don't want to sort of keep laboring an example, but like if there's something that you can't quite make, using a different tool might make that easier, but might make other things harder. And the big question that most people want to know the answer to is, should I learn Revit or should I learn Rhino? Is that kind of like something that you can all think, oh, well, I've kind of got this question in my mind, or I've asked this question before? Because they seem to be maybe at war with one another, or they seem to have different groups of people who will tell you that one is better than the other. Maybe I'm going to tell you one thing and then someone else will tell you something else. And someone might talk about Revit, and they might say, what's really cool about Revit is that if you move a window in your 3D model, then that window moves in all of your plans and elevations, and you can change what a door looks like in one drawing, and then it'll update instantly on all the others, and it saves you loads of time. Have you heard that? Has heard anyone talk about that? No, maybe not. Well, at some point, someone will try and convince you that Revit is the best thing in the world. I use Revit for my job. Revit is my daily experience. It can be often very frustrating. It can be often incredibly powerful. It is both of those things. It's huge. It's a huge piece of software. But it's a different tool to Rhino, and it has a different purpose. So specifically, it's a program designed for construction coordination and construction documentation. And it's not designed for 3D geometry manipulation, which is what Rhino is designed to do. And so what you're looking at here are kind of screenshots of a normal, everyday use of Revit in practice. What you'll notice is that there's this, on the right-hand side, you've got this big red pipe running through your building. What Revit is doing in that situation is you are collaborating with other people, one of whom is there to design the pipes, and you're there to design where the walls and the doors and the stairs are going to go. And at some point, you need to coordinate your efforts so that you make sure that you don't try and put a pipe through a wall. You need to make space for everyone's work. And that coordination work is what Revit is incredibly good at supporting, because multiple people can work on the same model, and you can combine models in really interesting ways. You can also see that for things like detail design and kind of these kind of very, very detailed construction drawings, like 1 to 5, for example, linked to your 3D model, it's incredibly powerful. However, and I put this down the end, the different work stage efficiency. So the RIBA has this idea of something called a work stage on a project, which means that when you start working in the real world on a project, or stage 0, really you're just exploring options. And you're trying to nail down like a concept or an idea that is going to take you through the design process. Stages 1, 2, 3 are kind of basically getting to planning and regulation, getting ready for getting approval from local authorities, finding builders who can actually build the thing. Stage 4 is about detailed technical design. So these kinds of drawings is what you would do at stage 4, typically on a project. Stage 5 and stage 6 are about actually building the project and then handing over the keys to the owner. So Revit has a lot of power at stages about 3 to 6, 7 maybe. Incredibly, incredibly efficient and powerful. However, using Revit at stages 0, 1, and 2 is basically like using a hammer to try and saw a piece of wood. It's going to be really frustrating because it's designed to allow you to actually build this building, but you're still in the phase where you're just coming up with ideas. You're exploring concepts. You want to be able to change your mind at a moment's notice. You want to be able to produce 3D geometry that could go in any direction. You don't need a wall to just be a straight wall. Maybe you want it to be curved. In Revit, that's really hard to do. In Rhino, you deal with the geometry directly. So all of these images are really about saying, well, I'm not sure where this thing is going to go. I'm not sure how to build it yet, but this is where I'm going. And it's incredibly powerful at the early stages. In your student work, you are going to spend most of your year in effectively RIBA work stages 0, 1, 2, and 3, maybe a bit of 4. So by learning Rhino, what you do is you make the majority of your year the ability to use a tool which is kind of going with the grain. It's like the tool that you're trying to use is helping you rather than hindering you. And there is a really high bar to both of these pieces of software. The learning curves are difficult. The learning curve for Rhino is steep, but once you've learned it, you're very employable, because if you've learned Rhino, you can learn anything else. It's like everything else seems easy in comparison. The other thing I've put there is learning opportunities. When else in your life are you going to get the opportunity to learn a piece of software that doesn't give you any constraints? Just gives you the ability to play with geometry at a basic level and produce any shape that you want. When you get into practice, you will probably, if you work for a larger practice, you'll be forced to learn Revit, and it will constrain you, and you've got your whole life to be constrained. But right now, you're a student, expand your horizons, and you will not be disappointed. So I'm going to teach you Rhino. If you want to ignore that and use Revit, you're very welcome to. We are completely platform agnostic, but those are the reasons why we are going to teach you Rhino rather than anything else. And mostly, you will find, and most people find, that there's a point at which if you start trying to learn Revit, it feels like you're accelerating, but then you hit a bit of a wall, and there's stuff you can't do, or stuff that gets very difficult to do. Many of you who've used Revit in your summer task will have found that. It's like really easy to build a wall and put a door in it, but very difficult to make a very specific shaped roof, for example, or the whole thing takes a lot longer. Any questions on that before we move on? Cool. I want to show you some more data, and I want to show you what you can do with that data. So let's quickly move over to, here we are, OpenStreetMap. OpenStreetMap I really like as a project. The idea behind OpenStreetMap is it's Wikipedia for mapping. So Google Maps, the way Google Maps work, it's done some crazy things. Let me just turn some of those things off. There we go. The way Google Maps works is that Google pays a lot of money for someone to drive around with a car with one of those fancy things on the top of it and kind of maps the city, and then is responsible for producing this map that is right in Google's eyes. Now, in Wikipedia, anyone can be an editor. Anyone can update a Wikipedia page. It's a kind of commons type situation where you are part of an organization or part of a community, and if you've got a piece of information to add to the pile, then you're allowed to do that. And what that means is there are real pros and cons. I'm just going to get rid of this. Right, so here we are in Oxford. And let's zoom into the center of Oxford somewhere. I don't know what we've got. Queen Street here. let's find some of the. Just going to get rid of that. Let's find some element on this map. Like, oh look, there we go. Okay, we've got a little P. If I zoom in, a little P and a tiny little bicycle. And what I can do is on any element on the OpenStreetMap, I can right click and do query features. What that does is it says, what is around where I've clicked? What is there? What stuff is there around where I've clicked? And I found there's something called cycle parking. So the P with a little tiny bike next to it, turns out that was a cycle parking. So I know I can park my bike there. The other cool thing I can do is I can click on that cycle parking and it will tell me this was edited almost 11 years ago by a user called Xtua. And this is the location. Do you remember last week I showed you Map Puzzle, and Map Puzzle asked for a latitude and a longitude in decimal form? That's exactly what's going on here, 51.75 minus 1.25. So that's the GPS coordinates of that thing. So if you wanted to go and find it, you could definitely go and find it. It's an amenity with a bicycle parking. There are stands, so it's a kind of bicycle parking where you maybe like bolt your bike to a stand. And it says there are 10 of them, and it's covered. So if you're looking for somewhere to park your bike in the center of the city, looks like we found everything that we need to know about this piece of bicycle parking. The other cool thing is this suddenly becomes a community. So I can click on this guy. There's his face. This is the guy who added the bicycle parking to OpenStreetMap 11 years ago. And each one of these green things is a contribution that he's made to the map. And you can see this guy has like been quite prolific. Let's look at map notes. So he's made a whole load of notes on the map, and he's having little conversations with people to update the map. The marketplace gazebo is not here anymore. So obviously he's found a mistake with the map, and he's having a little conversation with everyone else. This footpath is currently closed off due to riverbank damage 12 months ago. Oh, look, he was active 4 months ago. 19 days ago, look at this. He's updating the names of bridges. Then, here we go, traces. Each one of these is a route that this guy has walked where he's left his phone running and he's said, feel free to upload this public GPS route that I've just taken today to OpenStreetMap. So these are all routes that he has taken, that he's made public. He hasn't written a diary. Oh, fair enough. I could send him a message if I wanted to. I can see every single edit that he's made to the map. It looks like, I mean, this is really interesting from a kind of data protection point of view, isn't it? Maybe we need to like blur out his face or something. But clearly he lives in either Tywyn or more likely he lives in Oxford, because I can see these are all the edits he's made to the map in Oxford. And I wonder if there's any other edits that he's made. No, not too many. But do you see that now this has actually opened up a whole world that you don't get with Google Maps? There's some other things as well. Like let's zoom in. Let's zoom into Oxford, and we'll find a building. Let's click on this building. Here we are. It's a commercial building, 6 to 7 High Street. And what you'll notice is that at the moment that's not particularly exciting. Let's do one of these. Let's try and find one that has a little bit more building. The Mitre. Oh no, that one doesn't have quite so much. What I'm looking for is a building that has ideally some more information to it. No. We're going to struggle to find it. One of the things that you will find is each of these buildings has an ability to not just lay out what its footprint is on the map, but also how tall the building is. So last week I showed you the Ordnance Survey data. You could download all the building heights, but this is asking people to update the height of each of the buildings with their own kind of Wikipedia entry. One of the things that you can then do with that is that data then gets made available for free to other places, and if you use Autodesk's Forma tool, which is another really, really useful thing, let's pick up some kind of test project here. Whilst that loads. Here we go. All of these buildings, the height of these buildings has come from OpenStreetMap. So OpenStreetMap data then feeds into someone as big as Autodesk is using this data. So each one of these blocks that you can see has a height, and this one is 16.27 meters. So someone has gone around with a little laser measuring device or a big long measuring tape or something, figured out that the height of the building is 16.27 meters, or maybe like taken a photo and counted some bricks or something like that. And then they've entered that information into OpenStreetMap. Another cool thing you can do, and I said I was going to show you this last week, is you can look at the map through different layers. So if I was a cyclist, I'd have a very different set of requirements for how I would want to view a city. And here we are. Each one of these, here we go. There's a whole load of little blobs here, including, I wonder if I can make things a little bit bigger. There we go, so you can see on the screen. These are going to now be, if I put the information layer on, this is going to tell me stuff I need to know if I was a cyclist running around the city, or cycling around the city. There's a little blue block that says small bicycle parking. So because I'm looking at the city on this layer called Cycle Map, it's worked out that, well, clearly you want to know where to park your bike, right? So rather than just showing you everything, it's showed you a very specific filter through which to see the city. Similarly, if you care about transport, these are all the bus routes in the city. So doing some site analysis for your site, you might be really interested in how your site relates with public transport, what are the links, how can I get there, how can I get back. Now suddenly we have a route, a whole map that's going to show me all of the bus routes in the city and where they're running. I'm going to go back to just something quite blank at this point, because this is literally just showing me some buildings. But I can overlay things like map notes. You saw that guy, X-Tour, was like having a little conversation with all his little mappy friends. There's a little note here. This is ongoing construction for a new work cafe inside the Santander branch. Have you walked past that in the city centre? There used to be a bank, and now they're turning it into a cafe. And that's going on right now, and Wikipedia has picked it up. Wikipedia of Maps has picked it up way quicker than Google Maps has. You can also literally see every single piece of data on the map with a little outline of it. However, this can take quite a while to load, so let's try it, see what happens. Yeah, there you go. So this is every single one of these little elements, and then you can click on it, and it'll tell you what it is. There you go. It is a sliding door, which is wheelchair accessible. So that's telling you about how you get into that building. And then finally, and this is the one that I find really cool, these are not just that one guy's public GPS traces, but this is everyone's public GPS traces. And suddenly now what we can do is see where people are moving in the city when they have their phones on and transmitting to public, OpenStreetMap. Is it going to let me do this? Somehow it's struggled to load a little bit. Well, we're now looking at not just a map, but this is where people actually go. And suddenly, now we've overlaid a whole load of information that wasn't there before, that you couldn't see. Now, you get a bit overwhelmed if you tried to look at all of this, but you could imagine that actually looking at a city through the lens of this is where people actually walk will tell you a huge amount about how people travel. You can also see that, let's look at this guy here. These lines are like really smooth. What do you think might be happening along there? When we were looking in the center of the city, the lines were all jaggedy and wibbly wobbly. But these lines are really smooth. So what's going on? Sorry, say again? Drivers. Yeah, these guys are probably in a car or a bus or maybe even on a train. Because they're constrained to these lanes. And if I turn the public GPS traces off, you'll see, well, yeah, this is a road. And it's the kind of road that people are much more likely to drive on than walk on. So the map doesn't tell you that, but the people do. I get very excited about this. There's a huge amount of data in OpenStreetMap. You can fill your boots looking at all the different things there. You can similarly export by manually selecting an area in exactly the same way as I showed you with the what's the word? The Ordnance Survey map last week. You draw a rectangle and you say export this data, and you can bring it into Rhino or as a PDF or pretty much anything that you want. I've gone on far too long about OpenStreetMap because I'm too much of a nerd about it. But I want to show you some other sources of data that, if you're interested in different lenses to look through the world, these are going to be really helpful for you. So the first one is climate data. And climate data, you might think, well, what data? What data can we get access to? What's it actually going to teach us? And the first thing to be aware of is that there is a file type, a standard file type, called EPW, which stands for Energy Plus Weather. Energy Plus Weather. Energy Plus is like an organization that do things to do with climate. And there's a website called climate.onebuilding.org, where if you visit this website, you'll see it's called a repository of building simulation climate data. So what this is going to do is give you information about the site on which you want to build a building, which is relevant to the kind of climate data that you need to know if you're going to build a building that is climate resilient. So what kind of things, what might we expect to find in some climate data where you're worried about building a building in that place? Give me a wave. There might be some really obvious ones, there might be some less obvious ones. Have a think with the person next to you for 20 seconds. What kind of things would you expect to find in your climate data? Okay. Any thoughts? Yeah. Biodiversity. Oh, that's nice. That's a niche one. I wouldn't have thought about it. Potentially, yes. This file, unfortunately, doesn't include biodiversity data. But here's a challenge for you. Can you find biodiversity data somewhere on the internet? I'm sure you can. I'm sure you can. Anything else? Shout out. What's the big one? You might need to know, sorry? Temperature. You're probably going to want to know how hot it is. Am I building a building in a really hot place or a really cold place? Anything else? Yep. Wind direction. Amazing. Yes. Air pollution. Yeah, well, you can get air pollution data. It isn't included in EPW, but there are definitely air pollution data sources. Have a little Google around, see what you can see. That would be a really interesting overlay, wouldn't it? Of like a map with air pollution areas and mini plant outside of Oxford, and there's terrible air pollution levels, something like that. Yeah. Anything else? Humidity. Yes, great. Who said that? Yeah, amazing. Humidity, incredibly important because that affects how much evaporative cooling you might or might not be able to do in your building. So the cool thing about EPW data is if I go to Europe, region 6, and I tap on GBR, British Isles, United Kingdom, what you'll find is there is a file, an EPW file, for pretty much everywhere in the UK. However, there are really good ones and there are sort of rubbish ones. And the really good ones, and this is a little secret that people, you sort of, when you stop and think about it, it's quite useful to know, but the rest of the time you wouldn't even think about it. What have we got here? London Heathrow International. Why would we find weather and climate data, a really good source of weather and climate data, with the name of an airport? Well, I think your thing was wind direction, right? Well, planes need to know which wind direction is coming. Planes need to know when it rains. Planes need to know when it's foggy, when it's sunny, when it snows. Planes need to know how hot it is. And so if you're running an airport, you've got a really, really sophisticated weather station. So if you want access to the sophisticated weather station data from Heathrow Airport, well, look, you can download it from here for free from the internet. How cool is this? Here we go. Let's take 2009 to 2023. And I'm going to click on that file and it's going to download it. And it comes in as a zip file, which is a little bit annoying, so we have to unzip it. And for some reason, my computer is running a little bit slow. Here we go. Extract all. And then the other link that I've shared with you on these slides, and it's also in the lecture notes, is this little GitHub project called EPW Viz. Because the EPW data is pretty unintelligible on its own. We are working very hard to record this lecture at the same time as unzip a file, aren't we? Let's just try reloading that. There we are. Yeah. There's the file, it's ends EPW. There's a few other files in there, you can read about them if you want, but EPW is the one that we care about. The file itself, I could open it up in a notepad, and it's 1.5 megabytes in size, so it's probably going to take a little while, but basically it will just be a whole load of numbers. And what these numbers are doing is it's giving you information about what the weather is like at different times between, on average, between 2009 and 2023. And it's not going to be very nice to just sit and read those numbers, right? Because you're not that much of a nerd. I know you're studying architecture and you're on a digital course, but we haven't got time for that. So what we can do is we can go to this little website, the EPW Viz, and it's an online viewer and analysis tool for Energy Plus weather files. And I can drag and drop that file in here. And what it will do is now display that information in a much more visible way. We're looking here at temperature. It's called a flood plot, but basically what you've got here is all the hours of the day down the left-hand side. I'll zoom in a little bit so you can see. So there we go from midnight all the way through to midnight, and this is midday. And then where it's red, that's really, really hot. And in fact, I can switch the units from imperial to SI, so we're in degrees C rather than degrees F. And where it's really blue, it's really, really cold. And this is January, February, March, all the way through to December in the year. So what we can do by looking at this is we can tell, I mean, we're in the UK, right? But in London Heathrow, if you find yourself, hopefully it doesn't do that weird thing that it did last week. If you find yourself outside at 10 p.m. at the end of January, you can expect it to be around between 0 and -4 degrees C, which is pretty cold. And if you find yourself outside at 3 p.m. on June the 10th, you could expect it to be somewhere between 27 and 32 degrees C. Which tells you you've got a pretty wide range of temperatures that you've got to design for. But this isn't just, I know that I've got to design for cold and hot. This is the numbers, this is the data that will back up what you need to know about your site. And you can imagine that if, for example, I went to another place in the world, let's find Ethiopia, Madagascar. That sounds like fun, doesn't it? I don't know any of these places. Does anyone know anything about Madagascar? Let's find an airport if we can. There we go. That looks like AP. Let's go for A airport. Let's do the same thing here. Then clearly we're going to have a completely different set of climate data. Whilst that's loading, I'll come down here. You can even filter, so you can say, show me all of the dates where the temperature is between 0 and -5, and then it'll say, that's for months 1, 2, 11 and 12, so January, February, November and December, and mostly between midnight and 10 in the morning, which kind of makes sense, right? Nighttime in winter is when it's really cold. Cloud cover. So how much cloud cover there is. Again, planes need to know cloud cover. And then, my friend with the wind direction at the back saying, well, you probably need to know where the wind's coming from. Well, in Heathrow, where does the wind come mostly from? From the west. Well, here's a cool thing. And if you want to get super nerdy, let's go to Google Maps. Oh, let's go to OpenStreetMap, since it's open. I'm going to turn off my public GPS traces. I'm going to find Heathrow Airport, wherever it might be. Here we go. Where's Heathrow? Is it like... Here we go. What do you notice about Heathrow Airport that's linked to the wind direction? Here's Heathrow Airport. Here's the wind direction at Heathrow Airport. Yeah? Yeah, the tracks, well, the train tracks, I like the idea, like you fly your plane and you land on a train track. The runways, that's the word, isn't it? I couldn't even think of it myself. The runways are going east to west because the wind's going east to west, right? In the same way, when you're designing your building, maybe you want to orient it according to the climate that you're orienting for. This is a piece of design in action where they've used data to design an airport so that the planes are always going into the wind or away from the wind, that the wind isn't sort of hitting the side of them or something. Whilst that's loading, here we go. Let's extract all of this. Did you realize all this data was out there, that was available for you to use? And it's literally a few clicks away. And it's completely free and it's completely public. Is this data going to be useful for you this year? Even if you don't use it in this particular task, might it be useful for projects in the future? Probably, right? Yes. Has anyone got any ideas about how they could now start to overlay this information onto a 3D or a 2D map or some kind of mapping organization principles? If you haven't, that's okay, but at some point over the next week, the challenge will be to say, I've got all these sources of data, how am I going to bring them together? Maybe it's going to involve photography, maybe it's going to involve something else. This is like completely slowed down. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to assume that you would agree with me that Madagascar is probably a much hotter, more humid environment than the UK, and we'll leave it at that. And now it's just past 10 o'clock. We're going to take a 5-minute break, and when we come back, we'll talk about the next stage, which will involve a few other bits and bobs.